The polished glass walls of the executive suite at Apex Systems were quiet, reflecting the cold morning sun, except for the heavy slide of a manila folder across the table. I sat completely still in my leather chair, watching the corporate drama play out. Across the glossy mahogany table, Richard Thornton, who was 51 years old, leaned back with the casual arrogance of a man who believed disruption simply meant firing anyone with gray hair. Next to him sat Chloe, his 23-year-old daughter, a fresh business graduate, who was already wearing the company access badge that used to hang from my neck. The voice of Richard cut through the silent room like a cold blade. "You are finished here, Donald. 28 years of service is long enough." The words hit me deeper than I had expected, leaving a bitter taste. There was no thank you for the decades I had poured into this place. No mention of the sleepless nights, the holidays sacrificed, or the countless operational crises I had carried on my shoulders. It was just a cold dismissal, as if 28 years of loyalty could be erased in a single sentence. I thought of the text message I had sent my son Ryan 3 days earlier. I wrote that I could not make it to his college graduation ceremony because the company needed me to supervise a major system deployment. Ryan had written back saying it was okay that he understood. I had canceled my flight and stayed behind just to finalize a system rollout that saved the firm millions of dollars. And now, here I was, discarded in front of strangers and a smiling girl who had never weathered a single midnight network collapse. Richard leaned back, his suit immaculate and his tone rehearsed. "You will sign your separation papers right now," he said. "Human resources will process your exit immediately. We want this to be clean." His eyes did not show any regret, only the smug satisfaction of a man who believed he had won a great victory. I looked down at the folder he slid toward me. The weight of the papers felt heavy, representing the eraser of my name, my legacy, and my 28 years of building the invisible threads that held this company together. Chloe tapped her polished nails on the mahogany table, looking impatient as if my entire life of labor was nothing but a minor inconvenience standing between her and her promotion photos. Around the table, no one spoke. None of the other directors looked at me. No one thanked me, and no one stood up to defend me. With a hand that did not shake, I picked up the black pen. Richard mistook my silence for defeat, believing I was simply another broken old man accepting his fate. He did not realize that with his own signature already stamped at the bottom of those documents, he had just set into motion the one clause that would undo his entire empire. I signed the paperwork, closed the folder, and left the room. Once the heavy doors closed behind me, the silence of the hallway pressed in. For the first time in 28 years, I was not walking back to my desk to run simulations, to write code, or to fix a critical database crash that no one else understood. I was simply gone. The bitterness rose sharp in my throat as I walked toward the elevators. I remembered the white fluorescent lights at 2 in the morning, the steady hum of the server racks being the only sound in the building, while the executives slept in their beds. There were weeks when I barely saw my family because I was here, building the infrastructure that kept Apex Systems alive. I remembered the birthdays missed and the vacations canceled. I remembered whispering excuses into my phone at midnight while Ryan asked when I would be home. My answer had almost always been that I had to stay at the office. The company had become my second marriage, except this one demanded everything and gave nothing back. My real marriage had crumbled under its weight years ago. Clara had told me before she left that I was married to the servers more than to our marriage. She was not wrong. I had wore loyalty like armor, convincing myself that sacrifice meant security. I thought of the morning I collapsed at my desk, my chest tight and my vision blurred. The paramedic said it was physical exhaustion compounded by stress. A colleague had ridden with me to the hospital, holding a laptop because even from a stretcher, I was still answering urgent emails. The board had praised me for it, calling me dedicated and irreplaceable. I was irreplaceable until today. I closed my eyes as the elevator descended, remembering the worst scare of all, the night we almost lost the entire national network. A shipment delay in Munich had triggered a massive cascade of errors across 3 continents. For 72 hours, I lived on black coffee and sheer willpower, pulling strings and begging favors from international contacts until the system stabilized. It was that crisis, years ago that changed my perspective. I realized that this entire empire stood on trust I had personally built, not on corporate branding. That was the moment I insisted on adding a specific clause buried in the licensing agreements. If the chief architect was ever removed without cause, all operational rights to the core patents would automatically revert back to me. The founders had signed it without reading the fine print, desperate to lock in my services. I had never expected to use it. I had believed loyalty would protect me. Now, walking out of the building with bitterness cutting through every breath, I realized that clause was not just a footnote in an old contract. It was my ultimate weapon, and Richard, in his blind arrogance, had just handed me the key to my own liberation. The whispers started almost immediately after I left the boardroom. I had not even finished packing my few personal belongings before the gossip began to snake its way through the cubicles. Nepotism, they whispered in hushed voices by the coffee machine. The chief executive officer is replacing our best engineer with his own daughter. Can you believe it? I caught fragments of their conversations as I walked past clusters of employees who pretended not to look at me. Some faces showed sympathy, but most showed only fear. No one wanted to be the next target of the new management. Then there was Chloe, the new face of Apex Systems. She walked through the corridors like she already owned the building, her high heels clicking loudly on the hard tile. I watched her from a distance as I gathered my things. She entered her first strategy meeting with Richard walking behind her like a proud father, but the moment she opened her mouth, the corporate mask began to slip. She used technical terms completely out of context, confusing database replication with simple file backups. And at one point, she even suggested uploading our hardware patent designs to a public blockchain to keep them secure. The room fell into an awkward, heavy silence. The senior technical managers shifted in their seats, looking at their hands to avoid showing their disbelief. I felt my fists tighten. 28 years of precise engineering, of building genuine credibility, and here was a child playing executive, speaking in marketing buzzwords she did not understand. Later that afternoon, her social media post began to circulate among the staff. She had posted a photo of herself sitting in my old office chair, captioned with words about working hard and playing harder, boasting about running a billion-dollar company before the age of 24. My throat burned with the sheer injustice of it. I thought of the countless nights I had slept in that very chair, too exhausted to drive home. Now that room was nothing but a photo prop, a background for online vanity. Still, I chose to remain silent. Rage pressed at the edges of my composure. But I knew that silence was my strongest shield. I was not going to give Richard the satisfaction of seeing me break down. I let them believe I was leaving quietly, watching as their arrogance grew unchecked in the space I had once filled with discipline and hard work. As I stepped into the elevator, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an old software developer who had worked with me for over 15 years. "She will not last a month," the message read. Everyone knows it. I did not reply, but for the first time that day, I let a small smile touch my face. It was the quiet confirmation that I was not alone in my assessment. You cannot replace 28 years of sweat, scars, and deep technical knowledge with a family name and a business degree. I packed my desk slowly, each item a reminder of the years I had sacrificed. I took the framed photograph of Ryan when he was just a little boy, now a grown man starting his medical career. I took the worn leather journals filled with system sketches that had turned into 55 patents valued at $1.4 billion. Even the small plant on the windowsill, which had somehow survived years of neglected weekends, went into my cardboard box. Every object had a story, but none of them had earned me a simple thank you from the board. Colleagues walked past my desk, their eyes shifting away. Some whispered quick goodbyes, their voices tight with anxiety, while others avoided my gaze entirely, staring at their monitors as if they were incredibly busy. It was the uneasy look people give at a funeral, relieved that they are not the ones in the casket. I offered them a calm, reassured face. Let them think I was defeated. The reality was that the lifeline of Apex Systems still ran directly through my hands. The entire supply chain, the 23 international partners, and the complex software integrations were tied to me. As I closed my box, I slid my security badge into my pocket. It was a simple piece of plastic, but it had opened doors that others did not even know existed. I walked through the open office, feeling the weight of their eyes on my back. To them, I was already a ghost. But ghosts have a way of haunting those who think they are untouchable. I reached the lobby and pressed my badge against the scanner one last time. The system beeped and displayed the words, "Access granted," in bright green letters. I almost laughed out loud. The automated security system still recognized me as essential. Richard, in his haste to show authority, had not even bothered to check if the technical foundations were secure. I walked out into the bright afternoon sun, the heavy glass doors closing behind me. To anyone watching, I was just another terminated employee carrying a box of personal belongings. But I carried the quiet certainty that this story was very far from over. I drove home in absolute silence, letting the reality of my new freedom sink in. I looked at the box on the passenger seat and felt a sudden weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in my adult life, I had no system alerts to monitor, no midnight databases to rescue, and no corporate deadlines to meet. The silence was not empty. It was full of possibilities. The morning after my exit, I woke up earlier than usual, the internal clock of 28 years refusing to let me sleep in. I poured a cup of black coffee and sat by the window, watching the city wake up. I should have felt empty, but instead, I felt a sharp anticipation humming under my skin. At exactly 9 in the morning, the first crack in the foundation appeared. A primary partner in Munich halted a critical shipment of industrial processors. The automated notification they sent to Apex Systems was brief, clinical, and completely devastating. The message stated that the active operational license was suspended because the original architect was no longer verified on the system. I could easily picture the scene unfolding at the corporate headquarters. Richard would be pacing his office, his face red with anger, shouting at assistants who had no answers. Chloe would be scrolling through system files, her face burning as she tried to hide her total confusion. The arrogance of her social media posts would evaporate the moment she realized the computer systems did not care about her hashtags. By noon, former colleagues were sending me text messages about the rising panic. "They are saying that without you, no one knows how to route the shipments," one manager wrote. Chloe completely froze in the morning briefing. The pitying looks that had followed me out the door yesterday were already turning into doubt about the new leadership. Then, as if to confirm their panic, an email arrived in my personal inbox. A logistics coordinator in Tokyo had accidentally copied me on a thread meant for Richard. The subject line read, "Escalation supply chain collapse risk." I scrolled through the messages, watching the net tighten. Munich was refusing to release the processors, Tokyo was hesitating to clear the shipping lanes, and Vancouver was requesting immediate confirmation of system security. The entire global network I had spent decades building was locking up, and Richard had no idea how to untangle it. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee. Yesterday, they looked at me like an obsolete relic. Today, less than 24 hours later, the company was already unraveling. The public did not know yet, but the internal structure was cracking. The following morning, the situation grew even worse. Tokyo froze all logistics clearances, citing the exact same license suspension. Vancouver canceled 3 major shipments worth millions. One by one, the 23 international partners that formed the lifeblood of Apex Systems stopped operations. The message was clear. Without Donald Vance, the system does not move. Inside corporate headquarters, assistants were running through the halls. Phones were ringing constantly, and emergency meetings stretched late into the night. Richard still tried to project authority, demanding that the software programmers override the system blocks, but the programmers could do nothing. Then Chloe decided to intervene. She stood before the board of directors with a colorful slide deck, trying to project absolute confidence. "We have identified a minor database glitch," she announced, smiling for cameras that were not there. "Our technical team is confident we can bypass this lock within a few hours." The board members clapped, desperate for any good news, and the company stock even recovered slightly that afternoon. Richard smiled, believing the crisis was over, but physical systems do not care about corporate optimism. That evening, a synchronized warning message hit every server in the global network. The text was plain: Contract invalid, original architect missing. The override attempt had failed completely. The stock price crashed harder than before, and Richard lost his temper. He called partners personally, but they either did not answer or told him they only worked with Donald Vance. I imagined the panic in his voice, the realization that his authority was worthless. For years, he believed he owned the empire. Now he was learning that he only owned the office furniture. The tension in the offices reached a breaking point, and employees began to worry about their paychecks. Through all of this, I remained quiet at home. The collapse was not finished, but the cracks were widening, and Richard was running out of time. My intellectual property attorney, Gordon Fletcher, called me that afternoon to confirm that the 30-day transition period was progressing exactly as planned. He was opening the legal folders on his screen, analyzing every paragraph of the original agreement. Under Title 35, Section 271 of the United States Code, continuing to use my patented technologies without a valid license constituted willful patent infringement. This meant the board of directors was facing massive legal exposure, which could easily cost them their entire business in federal court. Additionally, my attorney noted that their sudden termination of several senior engineers to clear space for Chloe's new team violated the Federal Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, which carries heavy penalties for failing to give proper 60-day written notices. The legal trap was set, and the board had no way out. I spent my days in the garden, feeling the sun on my face and enjoying long conversations with Ryan. He told me about his future hospital plans, and for the first time in years, I could listen without looking at my buzzing phone. I was finally present in my own life. I spent hours pruning my rose bushes, watching the red petals catch the afternoon light, knowing that my quiet patience was my greatest asset. The corporate noise felt miles away, and I relished the quiet peace of my home office, drinking hot green tea while my former managers scrambled to find solutions to a problem they had created themselves. Let them think I was nothing but a memory, while the legal clock ticked closer to midnight. The corporate offices of Apex Systems were in a state of complete panic. Richard had called an emergency meeting at dawn, forcing exhausted executives to look at screens filled with red error codes. Chloe stood at the front of the room, her voice cracking as she tried to explain her contingency plans, but her colorful charts were ignored. Remote investors were shouting through the speakers, demanding to know why the stock was collapsing and why no one had flagged the patent licensing risks. Outside the building, the news had already broken. Business channels ran headlines about the supply chain collapse at Apex Systems, tying the disaster directly to my absence. On social media, a campaign to bring me back began to trend. Users shared Chloe's proud photos alongside the falling stock charts, and employees posted anonymous messages on LinkedIn stating that the company had fired the wrong person. The public image of Apex Systems was disintegrating. I spent my afternoon in a small cafe 2 blocks from the headquarters, drinking coffee and reading the news on my phone. I felt a calm stability that had been missing for years. The world was spinning out of control for Richard, and I did not have to lift a finger to cause it. While I sat there, my phone buzzed with a message from a private number. The text was short. "We need to meet off the record tonight," signed by a member of the board of directors. I let the phone rest on the table. The board was already looking for a way to save themselves. They had let Richard discard me, and now they were reaching out in secret. I stirred my coffee, enjoying the irony. Let them scramble. I had all the time in the world. On Monday morning, the legal papers were finalized. My name was officially registered as the sole owner of 55 patents valued at $1.4 billion. The conditional license Apex Systems had relied upon was dead. I did not return to the offices. Instead, I called the international partners who had stood by me for decades. They answered with relief, eager to rebuild our relationships on terms of mutual respect. I rented a quiet downtown office, placing a simple wooden plaque on my desk that read Chief Architect Donald Vance. It was not about corporate vanity. It was a statement of my independence. The real crisis hit Apex Systems on the 23rd day after my departure. In their main distribution center in Toronto, a steel diverter arm snapped under the constant speed increase Chloe had forced. Because she had bypassed the safety sensors, the drive motors kept running, crushing thousands of packages and causing millions of dollars in damages. The mechanical grinding sound was described by workers as a physical explosion of conveyor tracks and metal gears. The physical collapse triggered the automatic cryptographic lockdown across all 40 hubs. Every conveyor belt in the country stopped, and the company was losing over $150,000 every hour. Richard ran to the server room, screaming at the programmers to override the lock. The lead programmer, Henry, turned to him and shook his head. "We cannot bypass this," he said. When Chloe deleted the safety routines, she triggered the master security vault. "The architecture is written in a language we do not understand. There is only one person who can unlock it, and that is Donald Vance." The next morning my phone rang. It was Chloe. She tried to sound important, but her voice was shaking. "We have a minor system delay, Donald," she said. "We are willing to offer you $50 an hour as a temporary consultant to clear it up." I smiled at the insult. "No thank you, Chloe," I replied. "I am no longer available." I hung up. 10 minutes later, Richard called, screaming about sabotage and threatening to sue me. He said he would put me in federal prison. I listened calmly until he stopped to breathe. "Richard," I said, "I did not sabotage anything. I sent you 24 written warnings about the physical limits of the system, and you chose to ignore them. You brought this on yourself." His voice cracked with desperation. "Donald, please," he begged. "Our largest client is canceling their contract. The board is going to fire me. Name your price." I told him to search the patent registry and read the cease and desist notice my lawyer had sent to the board. "The license has expired, Richard," I said. "You do not have a glitch. You have a federal patent infringement case under Section 271. I hung up, leaving him to face the reality of his own making. The silence that followed the call was the most peaceful sound I had heard in decades, a quiet confirmation that the balance of power had shifted forever. I looked out the window of my new office, watching the city traffic crawl below. I knew that the board would call me next, because they had no other choice. They had ignored the architect, and now the entire house was falling down. I poured a fresh cup of water, watching the glass capture the cold office lights, and sat back, waiting for the inevitable emergency call from their representatives. They had treated my knowledge as a liability, and now they were discovering it was the only asset they had left. The legal notices were arriving at the corporate headquarters, and the ticking of the clock was growing louder for everyone in that glass tower. At 2 in the afternoon on Saturday, the board of directors of Apex Systems held an emergency meeting. The chairman, Charles Montgomery, led the call. All 12 board members and the corporate lawyers were present, their faces tense on the screen. Richard sat in his office, sweat dripping down his forehead, trying to spin a story about a disgruntled employee holding the company hostage. Then the chairman unmuted his microphone and announced that they had added me to the call. I joined the video conference from my quiet home office, wearing a simple navy blazer. I did not look angry or bitter. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," I said calmly. "I would like to share my screen and present the documents." I displayed the original contractor agreement from 2007, showing that I retained sole ownership of the 55 patents and that the license terminated 30 days after my employment ended. The board members stared in shock, leaning forward on their cameras to inspect the signature lines. The chairman, Charles Montgomery, rubbed his temples, staring at my signature and then looking directly at Richard with cold, furious eyes. I then showed the active patent certificates and the receipts for the maintenance fees I had paid myself for 19 years. Next, I displayed the 24 warning emails I had sent to Richard and Chloe, which they had ignored. Finally, I played the video recording of Richard tearing up my contract and telling me my work was useless. The silence on the call was absolute. The chairman looked at Richard, his voice shaking with anger. "Silas, you have ruined this company," he said, using the middle name in his fury. "You have exposed us to hundreds of millions in liability, destroyed our network, and violated the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act." The corporate lead counsel cleared his throat, admitting that they had no legal grounds to fight my claims, stating that the original agreement was completely airtight. He explained to the board that continuing to run the software without my license constituted willful patent infringement under Title 35, Section 271 of the United States Code, which carried treble damages. The board members did not hesitate. The chairman called each of their names one by one, and they quietly and firmly voted to fire Richard Thornton immediately for gross breach of fiduciary duty and escort Chloe from the premises. Chloe sat on her father's screen, her eyes red with tears, before she shut her laptop and vanished from the call. The chairman then turned to me. "Donald, on behalf of the board, I apologize for the terrible way you were treated. What are your terms to save this company?" I delivered my terms in a calm, firm voice. First, Apex Systems will pay an immediate settlement of $11 million for the unauthorized use of my patents. Second, you will sign a new licensing agreement paying a 15% annual royalty on all system operations. Third, all legal fees will be paid by the company today. The board did not argue. They signed the agreements within the hour, knowing that every hour of downtime cost them fortunes. Once the paperwork was finalized and the funds had cleared in my account, I logged into my secure terminal. I entered my cryptographic key, watching the system status bar go from 0 to 100% as the servers initialized. Across the country, the red warning lights turned green, the motors hummed, and the supply chain resumed its work. 6 months have passed since that day. My new consulting firm is thriving, and I only work with clients who value experience. Ryan graduated at the top of his class and is now in his residency, completely debt-free. As I sit on my porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun hit my garden, I reflect on the lesson. Arrogance and family connections cannot override the laws of physics or the strength of a solid contract. True leverage comes from competence, preparation, and knowing your worth before anyone tries to tear it down. The gray wolves of the technical world know that experience is irreplaceable. Richard learned that lesson too late. I learned it just in time. If this story resonates with you, share your thoughts below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because stories of resilience and justice deserve to be heard. Experience isn't obsolete. It's irreplaceable. And when you try to replace the irreplaceable, the entire architecture collapses. I watched the security footage of me walking out of the building with my cardboard box, and I realized I was not walking away in defeat. I was walking toward my own freedom, toward a future that belonged entirely to me, built on the steady foundation of my own work, protected by the laws of the land and the quiet power of truth. The world moves fast, and young leaders will always try to push the limits, but without a solid foundation, speed is nothing but a faster path to total destruction. I had built the foundation, and in the end, it was the foundation that remained standing, long after the storm of arrogance had passed. I unclasped the old silver watch Richard had given me years ago, placing it in a desk drawer and closing it forever, ready for the clean start I had earned. I took a slow sip of my tea, feeling the warmth spread, completely content with the quiet justice that had finally unfolded.